He thought he could cheat in peace, sailing with his lover on a luxury cruise. But when the captain walked on stage, his blood froze. Because it wasn't a stranger commanding the ship, it was his wife. And from that moment, the ocean itself turned against him. Don't forget to subscribe, also generously hit the like button cause it means the world to us. Please sit back, relax and enjoy as we dive into the story. Anthony Blake leaned against the floor-to-ceiling window of his Manhattan office, the skyline glittering like shards of ambition beneath a pale afternoon sun. The glass tower he'd built his company in hummed with the pulse of success, phones ringing, assistants rushing, contracts sliding across polished desks. To anyone else, this was the dream. To him, it had begun to feel like a cage of glass and steel. His reflection stared back at him, sharp suit, gold watch, hair perfectly combed. He looked like the version of himself he had always wanted to become, not the boy from Portland Harbor who carried fish crates with his father, but the man who signed deals that shifted shipping lanes across the Atlantic. Yet inside, a strange hollowness gnawed. He ran a hand through his hair and exhaled. Behind him, his office door creaked. His secretary, a young man in suspenders, poked his head in. "Mr. Blake, the Singapore contract is ready for your signature." Anthony waved him off, eyes still fixed on the skyline. "Leave it. I'll get to it later." The boy hesitated. "Sir, they're waiting." "I said later." His voice cut sharp, making the boy retreat. Anthony loosened his tie and sat back in his leather chair. His desk was cluttered with papers, but his phone vibrated insistently. He picked it up, already guessing who it was. Selena. The screen lit up with her photo, bronzed skin, full lips, eyes that seemed to dance even in pixels. He swiped quickly. "You're late," her sultry voice teased through the line. "I'm working," Anthony replied, though his tone softened. "Not everyone gets to spend afternoons at spas." "You're not working," she said, certain. "You're staring out that window again, bored out of your mind." Anthony chuckled despite himself. "Maybe. Then let me fix that," she purred. "I found something. A cruise. Caribbean. 10 days of luxury. No business calls, no nagging responsibilities. Just us." Anthony leaned back, closing his eyes as he imagined it, waves, music, champagne, Selena's laugh drifting under moonlight. "What about," his words trailed. He didn't finish Diana's name. Selena smirked into the phone, her voice sharp with playful arrogance. "Your wife. She's at home folding laundry, isn't she? She'll never know. Besides, don't you deserve some fun? All work and no play makes Anthony dull." The silence stretched. Anthony tapped his pen against the desk. He should have said no. He should have reminded her he was married. But instead, he whispered, "Book it." Selena laughed triumphantly, a sound like champagne bubbles rising. Anthony ended the call, palms sweaty. He sat still for a long moment, hearing the tick of the office clock. Finally, he rose, walking back to the window. The city roared beneath him, restless and alive. Somewhere in that sea of noise was Diana, his wife, the woman who had stood by him when this skyline was only a dream. She had been enough once. But now, Anthony told himself, he needed fire. He needed escape. And in Selena's arms, he thought he had found both. Yet deep inside, something whispered, consequences always sail faster than desire. The Portland house still smelled of lemon polish and old wood. Diana Blake folded warm laundry with practiced hands, the rhythm soothing. Shirts, trousers, towels, she stacked them neatly into piles. Outside, the gulls cried faintly, a reminder of the harbor where her childhood dreams had once taken root. She moved slowly, humming a tune her father used to sing. Her fingers lingered on one shirt, Anthony's white button-down. She pressed it gently, remembering when she had ironed the same shirt before his first investor meeting. He had been nervous then, clutching numbers and charts, whispering, "What if I fail?" "You won't," she had said, smoothing the collar. And she had been right. But success had come with shadows. His absences grew longer, his laughter shorter, his eyes restless. She never accused. That wasn't her way. She carried his home, his mother, his bills, even his silence. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A message from her old professor, "Congratulations again, Captain Blake. We are proud of you." Diana's lips curved faintly. Few people knew of her hidden life. Between meals and bills, she had studied maritime courses, navigation simulations, safety drills. While Anthony expanded his empire, she had quietly built one of her own, a mastery of the sea. She opened her desk drawer and pulled out a small leather folder. Inside lay her maritime license. She traced the embossed letters, remembering the nights she had studied by lamplight while Anthony slept. Her father's voice echoed in memory. Ships listen to no one but their captain, Diana. If you want respect, command it. A soft knock came at the door. Her mother-in-law, frail but smiling, shuffled in with her cane. Diana, child, you work too hard. Sit and rest. Diana smiled warmly, guiding her to a chair. I'm fine, Mama Blake. The older woman's eyes softened. You remind me of your father, steady, never rushing. Anthony doesn't know how lucky he is. Diana's throat tightened, but she only nodded. She tucked the license back into the folder and returned to folding. Her sacrifices had been quiet, unseen. But her destiny wasn't gone, it was waiting, as steady as the tide. Selena Lopez flipped her hair, scrolling through cruise packages on her tablet as she sipped iced coffee in her Miami penthouse. Sunlight spilled across glass walls, glinting off designer shoes scattered like trophies. She smirked at the photos, grand ballrooms, turquoise seas, decks glittering under fairy lights. She wanted it all, and Anthony's wallet made it possible. When Anthony arrived later that evening, suit jacket draped over his arm, Selena greeted him in silk. She draped herself across the sofa, pouting. You look tired, Tony. You need a break. He sighed, loosening his tie. Work never ends. That's why I planned something. She showed him the cruise screen. Look, Caribbean, 10 days. The biggest liner. Private suites, gala nights, spas. Imagine us, dancing under stars while waves kiss the hull. Anthony hesitated. It's risky. Selena laughed, sliding closer. Diana doesn't even know how to turn on Instagram. You think she'll find out? Come on, live a little. Her perfume wrapped around him, intoxicating. She placed the tablet in his hands, her eyes sparkling. Say yes. He swallowed. Yes. Selena squealed, clapping her hands. She kissed him deeply, triumphant. In her mind, this wasn't just a vacation, it was proof she could drag him fully into her world. She imagined selfies on deck, champagne in hand, captions that screamed luxury. Diana was a ghost in the background, irrelevant. What Selena didn't know was that Diana's world was the ocean itself, and Selena was sailing straight into it. The harbor swarmed with life, families hugging, children squealing, luggage rolling across planks. A brass band played upbeat tunes as the cruise ship loomed, white and magnificent. Anthony carried Selena's designer bags, his shirt clinging with sweat. Selena posed for selfies, lips pursed, the ship behind her like a crown jewel. Relax, she teased. You look guilty already. I'm just hot, Anthony muttered, scanning nervously. His heart thudded at every passing face, as though Diana might appear. But she was nowhere in sight. At least, not here. Crew members greeted passengers cheerfully. Selena looped her arm through Anthony's. This is paradise, Tony. Forget her. Forget everything. Anthony forced a laugh. He told himself this was his reward. Yet inside, guilt scratched like claws. Above, from a hidden vantage point, Diana adjusted her crisp uniform. She had boarded earlier, unseen. Her badge gleamed as she observed from the shadows. Anthony's figure on the dock was unmistakable, and beside him, Selena's bright dress burned her vision. Her heart clenched, but her expression stayed composed. She whispered to herself, the sea will test him. Diana walked the ship's corridors, shoes echoing softly. Her uniform fit like armor, her presence calm yet commanding. Crew members saluted respectfully, unaware of the storm inside her chest. She paused at the passenger manifest displayed in her quarters. Anthony Blake. Selena Lopez. The names stabbed like knives, but she steadied herself. From her private cabin, she whispered, truth doesn't need chasing. It finds its way. Above deck, Anthony and Selena laughed, toasting champagne. Passengers watched with idle curiosity. But unseen eyes followed. Crew reported quietly, noting their movements. Anthony didn't know that every step he took was being watched, not by paparazzi, not by strangers, but by the very woman he had betrayed. Diana leaned against her desk, staring at their wedding photo. Her fingers trembled for a moment, then steadied. She would not crumble. Her ship was under her command. And soon, Anthony would realize that secrets never survive at sea. The pool deck shimmered with turquoise water, sunlight splintering into 1,000 bright fragments. Music pulsed from hidden speakers while passengers lounged with cocktails. Selena Lopez strutted across the deck like it was a runway. Her red dress clung in all the right places, catching stares from every direction. She smiled as if the entire ship had been chartered to celebrate her beauty. Anthony followed, sunglasses hiding the unease in his eyes. He carried a glass of champagne, though his grip was tight, knuckles pale. Selena dragged him to the poolside bar, tossing her hair at the bartender, who grinned too eagerly. Anthony noticed, frowning, but Selena only laughed, tapping the rim of her glass for a refill. She leaned close to Anthony, voice low but teasing. "You look like you're waiting for the police to storm the ship." Anthony forced a smirk. "I just don't want anyone from New York recognizing me." "Please," she scoffed, sipping her drink. "No one here cares about your boring logistics company. They're all too busy taking pictures of me." She held her phone high, turning them into a glittering selfie, Selena's red lips, Anthony's awkward smile, the pool sparkling behind them. She captioned it quickly, something about living her best life, and uploaded without hesitation. Anthony's stomach tightened. He imagined Diana stumbling across that post, but he shoved the thought away. Diana didn't care for social media. She wouldn't see it. Still, guilt gnawed at him. Selena slid her hand across his thigh under the table, eyes gleaming. "Relax," she whispered. "Your wife is far away. This is our world now." Anthony tried to laugh, but his eyes flickered across the deck. Too many people. Too many glances. Something about the way crew members lingered unsettled him. He brushed it off, telling himself it was paranoia. He didn't know that one of those crewmen had already reported his every move to Diana. When night came, Selena pulled him onto the dance floor. Passengers clapped, forming a circle as she swayed against him, the red dress catching the light. Anthony laughed nervously, keeping pace. But even with music blaring, he felt like someone was watching. Above, from a shadowed balcony, Diana stood still, her uniform crisp. Her hands rested on the railing, her face unreadable. She didn't blink as her husband danced, kissed, laughed with another woman under her command. Selena twirled, her hair flying. Anthony smiled, but his chest thudded with dread. He didn't know it yet, but the sea itself had become Diana's witness. Diana Blake sat alone in her private cabin, the hum of the ship steady beneath her. On her desk lay an old photograph, her wedding day. She and Anthony smiling, both too young, too hopeful. She touched the edges of the picture, tracing Anthony's face with her thumb. She remembered the vows he had whispered back then, words trembling but sincere, "Forever, Diana. No matter what comes, it's us." Her lips curved faintly, though not in joy. Those promises had turned brittle with time. He had forgotten, but she had not. She rose and crossed to the mirror, adjusting her uniform. "Captain." The word still felt surreal. Years of training, of hiding her ambitions, had led to this moment. And yet, the man who once claimed to love her now paraded across her ship with another woman. Her chest ached, but she steadied her breath. She reminded herself of her duty. A captain did not waver, not even in storms. The intercom buzzed. Her first officer's voice came through. "All systems checked, Captain. Smooth sailing tonight." "Thank you," Diana replied calmly. "Maintain course." She ended the call, her hands tightening briefly on the desk. Memories flickered, nights when Anthony had been late, excuses rehearsed. She had suspected but never accused. Instead, she had poured herself into study, into something he could not control or belittle. Now she stood stronger, yet lonelier than ever. She whispered to her reflection, "Every voyage has a reckoning. His will come." She sat again, writing notes for her gala speech. Her pen moved steadily, though her heart pulsed with grief. She would not confront him, not yet. The sea had its own timing, and Diana believed in its rhythm. Outside, waves broke softly against the hull. Inside, Diana's silence hardened into resolve. The ballroom glowed with chandeliers, gold spilling across marble floors polished to perfection. A quartet played violins while waiters moved with trays of wine and hors d'oeuvres. Passengers in gowns and tuxedos filled the space, their laughter echoing. Anthony adjusted his bow tie, his stomach knotted. Selina stood beside him, dazzling in diamonds he had bought the day before. She grinned, soaking in every glance cast her way. "This," she whispered, "is our kingdom." Anthony smiled faintly, but unease gnawed. He sipped champagne, eyes flicking across the room. Crewmen in uniform moved quietly, efficient. Something about the way one steward lingered too long unsettled him. Selina tugged his arm. "Dance with me." He obliged, leading her onto the floor. She swayed against him, head thrown back in laughter. Passengers clapped, charmed by her boldness. Anthony forced a smile, though sweat prickled his neck. Nearby, a steward whispered into a radio, discreet but deliberate. Anthony didn't notice. On the upper level, Diana prepared for her own appearance. She adjusted her cap, eyes steady. Crew whispered of the mysterious new captain, unseen but respected. Soon, the announcement would be made. She felt the weight of the moment pressing closer. Below, Selina posed dramatically near the orchestra, begging Anthony to film her. He obliged, phone trembling slightly in his hand. She kissed him for the camera, her red lips staining his cheek. Passengers applauded playfully. Anthony laughed nervously, though his eyes kept darting upward. He didn't know why, but he felt like the ceiling itself was watching. The gala sparkled, but tension coiled beneath its glitter. Diana stood ready, her name waiting to be revealed. The morning sun stretched over endless blue. Anthony leaned against the rail, inhaling salt air. Selina still slept inside their suite, tangled in silk sheets. He should have felt free, but the ocean's vastness made him uneasy. He thought of Diana, her quiet smile, the way she folded his clothes neatly, her patience that had always steadied him. Guilt pricked sharp. He wondered if she suspected. A steward passed, offering a polite greeting. Anthony nodded faintly, unaware the steward carried instructions directly from Diana. Anthony closed his eyes, trying to shake the unease. He told himself he deserved this escape. But the waves whispered otherwise. Footsteps echoed. Selina emerged, robe loose, hair messy but eyes sparkling. "There you are," she teased, kissing his neck. "Why do you look like a man waiting for a trial?" Anthony chuckled weakly. "Just thinking." "Stop thinking," she said, tugging him back toward the cabin. "We didn't come here to brood. We came to live." She pulled him inside, slamming the door. But even as he sank into her arms, Anthony felt the sea pressing against him, a reminder that secrets never stay buried. Above, in the control room, Diana marked the coordinates. She had seen his name on the manifest days ago. Now, she tracked his steps through reports. She whispered to herself, the ocean never hides truth. By the third day, Selina grew restless. The novelty of champagne and sunbathing wore thin. She lounged by the pool, tapping her phone impatiently. "I want more," she told Anthony bluntly, slipping on sunglasses. "Jewelry. Spa treatments. Adventures. Don't make me beg." Anthony sighed, handing over his card. He watched her strut toward the shops, heart heavy. Hours later, she returned with bags, showing off necklaces and dresses. Passengers admired, some envious. Anthony smiled faintly, though his eyes dimmed. That evening, Selina leaned close at dinner, whispering, "Let's explore the captain's deck. Imagine the photos." Anthony choked on his drink. "That's impossible." Selina pouted, swirling her wine. "You're no fun." He promised something later, desperate to calm her. She laughed, already distracted by another passenger's compliment. Anthony stared at her, realizing her charm glittered only under attention. Beneath it, emptiness. Meanwhile, Diana watched from her control room. She noted every demand, every indulgence. Selina's hunger was fuel for the storm Diana knew was coming. The sea rocked gently, but tension tightened with every wave. Anthony didn't know it yet, but his escape was already over. Diana rose before dawn, her body trained to the rhythm of the ship. The corridors were still, the sea whispering against the hull. She pulled on her uniform, the starched white fabric settling over her shoulders like armor. The captain's badge gleamed faintly in the mirror, reminding her that this was no longer a dream, it was command. The bridge smelled faintly of coffee and salt. Her officers greeted her with crisp nods, their respect genuine. She moved among them with quiet authority, checking logs, adjusting routes, reviewing reports. Each word she spoke was measured, deliberate, carrying calm certainty. They admired that about her, no panic, no raised voice, just steady control. But beneath her composure lived something rawer. Each time she glanced at the passenger list on her desk, the name leapt at her like a thorn, Anthony Blake. And right below it, Selena Lopez. She had seen them on deck the day before, Anthony's arm looped around Selena's waist, his smile forced, Selena laughing too loudly. The sting had pierced Diana's chest, but she had not faltered. Instead, she whispered silently, "Patience." An ensign handed her a clipboard. "Captain, morning safety drills are complete. All lifeboats accounted for." "Good," Diana replied, scanning the numbers. "Continue with the regular checks." She walked to the observation window, gazing out at the horizon. The sea stretched endless, blue and unforgiving. A captain had to be like that, endless, steady, refusing to be bent by storms. Yet her thoughts betrayed her discipline. She remembered Anthony's nervous laugh when they were first married, the way he'd confessed he hated small talk at business dinners. She had carried his burdens then. And now, on this ship, she carried the knowledge of his betrayal. Her first officer stepped closer. "Captain, will you be joining the gala tonight for the announcement ceremony?" "Yes," she said calmly, though her chest tightened. Everything must proceed as planned. She returned to her quarters briefly, rehearsing her speech. Words about safety, trust, and the journey ahead. Her tone remained professional, but in her mind, she could already see Anthony's face when he realized who stood at the helm of his world. She whispered again to herself, "Patience, Diana. The sea does not hurry, yet it delivers." Anthony sat with Selena at the ship's cafe, a plate of pancakes and tropical fruit untouched before him. Selena scrolled through her phone, showing him videos she had just uploaded. Strangers online flooded her comments with compliments, and she beamed with satisfaction. Anthony nodded half-heartedly, stirring his coffee. His eyes drifted to other couples at nearby tables, older pairs laughing quietly, hands intertwined. A pang of memory struck Diana, her gentle laugh when he used to bring her flowers home after long days, the way she'd scold him softly for forgetting to eat dinner. Selena leaned back, sunglasses perched on her nose. "You're brooding again. Honestly, Tony, you make vacation look like a funeral." He tried to smile. "I'm just tired." She rolled her eyes. "Tired? You've done nothing but lounge and eat. Maybe you're just not used to being with someone who actually lives life." Her words bit sharper than intended, but she didn't notice. She was already distracted by a waiter who complimented her dress. She leaned toward him, laughing too loudly, soaking in the attention. Anthony's jaw tightened. He wanted to scold her, but the hypocrisy stopped him cold. What right did he have? He was the one betraying vows. That evening, music filled the open deck. Selena danced with strangers while Anthony leaned against the railing, staring at the moonlit sea. The waves shimmered silver, endless, silent. He thought of Diana again, how she used to sit with him during storms, reminding him that seas always calmed. He realized with a jolt that her presence had been his anchor all along. Without her, he felt adrift. He whispered into the wind, "What have I done?" Unbeknownst to him, Diana watched from the shadows above, her face unreadable. She had seen enough. Below deck, crew members whispered as they worked. The new captain was unlike any they'd served before, precise, calm, but mysterious. Few had seen her outside official duties. Rumors spread quickly in the confined corridors. She was younger than expected, sharper than anyone anticipated. Anthony overheard two stewards chatting near the bar as he passed. "She's brilliant," one said. "Caught an error in navigation before anyone else noticed. Saved us hours." "And she's dignified too," the other replied. "Not like some captains who shout. She just gives you this look and you listen." Anthony smirked faintly, uninterested, or at least, that's what he told himself. But curiosity pricked at him. Who was this captain they admired so much? Selena noticed his distraction. She waved her hand in front of his face. "Earth to Anthony. Who cares about some captain? You're here with me." He nodded quickly, brushing the thought aside. But the whispers lingered, like distant thunder before a storm. Later that evening, Selina demanded photos by the grand staircase. Anthony obliged, though his smile looked hollow. Behind the camera flashes, crew exchanged glances. Some recognized him from the reports they'd already given to Diana. The whispers about the captain weren't just idle gossip anymore, they were threads weaving closer to his fate. Night blanketed the ship, stars scattered like jewels across a velvet sky. Diana stood alone on the bridge, the hum of machinery steady beneath her feet. The wheel gleamed under her hands as she gazed at the dark horizon. Her chest ached with every memory of Anthony, his touch, his laugh, his vows. She had watched him kiss another woman on her ship, their intimacy flaunted openly. The betrayal was sharp, but she did not crumble. Her whisper carried softly into the night air, let him believe he is free. Truth will anchor him soon enough. She remembered their early years, the diner where they'd shared cheap meals, the way he used to squeeze her hand during storms. He had forgotten those days, but she had not. Her second officer entered quietly. "Captain, all systems steady. Would you like me to take over?" "No," Diana replied, her voice calm. "I'll stay." She remained at the helm, eyes fixed on the stars. She was not waiting for confrontation. She was waiting for revelation. And she knew it was close. The ocean whispered against the hull, its rhythm steady. It was as if the sea itself conspired with her, preparing to expose everything. Morning brought sharp sunlight and sharper words. Selina sat at breakfast with Anthony, her voice playful but edged. "When are you leaving, Diana?" she asked, twirling her necklace. "I'm not going to stay your secret forever." Anthony nearly choked on his coffee. He stammered excuses, business complications, timing, paperwork. Selina's eyes narrowed. "You're lying," she said flatly. "You think you can keep me as your little holiday fling? Decide soon, Anthony. I won't wait forever." He nodded nervously, his palms sweating. Around them, passengers laughed over fruit and pastries, oblivious to the storm brewing at their table. Selina leaned closer, her perfume overwhelming. "I want to be Mrs. Blake someday. Don't make me regret choosing you." Anthony's stomach twisted. He had always avoided hard decisions, but Selina's demands were cornering him. He prayed for silence to buy him more time, but silence was running out. Across the room, a steward noted every word, reporting later to Diana. The clock was ticking faster than Anthony realized. In her quarters, Diana unfolded a letter she had kept for years. Anthony's handwriting sprawled across the page, filled with promises of forever. She traced the lines, remembering nights when he had meant them. But forever had ended quietly, without his notice. She folded the letter carefully, slipping it back into her journal. Duty pressed heavy on her shoulders. The gala's closing ceremony approached, and she would be required to speak. She rehearsed in front of the mirror, her voice steady. Words about dignity, safety, trust. Not one syllable about betrayal. She didn't need to expose Anthony herself. Truth had a way of rising, just as the tide did. She straightened her cap, whispering to her reflection, "You are captain now, not just a wife left behind. Command your destiny." The mirror showed strength, but behind it lived sadness. Still, Diana chose dignity over revenge. Her heart no longer beat to Anthony's rhythm, it beat to the seas. The ship glided across turquoise waters, sunlight sparkling against gentle waves. Passengers lounged with cocktails, laughter rising like gulls. To them, it was paradise. Anthony sat stiffly beside Selina at the pool. She hummed, stretching lazily, sunglasses hiding her eyes. She looked perfectly content, but Anthony's restlessness betrayed him. He scanned faces, every uniform unsettling him. His chest tightened when an officer passed, nodding politely. Something about the crisp salute made his throat dry. Selina noticed. "Relax," she teased, sipping her drink. "No one here cares about your boring little life back home." He forced a laugh, but dread gnawed deeper. He couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Above, in her quarters, Diana finalized her announcement speech. The words flowed evenly, but her hands trembled briefly before steadying. Tonight, the ship would gather in the ballroom. Tonight, the truth would stand unveiled. The sea looked calm, but beneath its glass surface, storms churned unseen. Anthony leaned back, closing his eyes against the sun. He told himself it was just nerves. But every wave that lapped against the hull whispered the same message: the calm was over. The sun burned golden across the horizon as the dining hall filled with chatter. Selina sat close to Anthony, champagne glass in hand, eyes glittering like she already owned the ship. She leaned across the table, voice dripping with ambition as she painted pictures of the life she craved. "This is just the beginning," she murmured, tapping her glass against his. "Imagine us on a private island, servants running everywhere, diamonds that shine so bright they blind people." Anthony forced a smile, though his stomach nodded. He watched her lips move, heard her laughter rise, but the only image haunting him was Diana, her quiet eyes, her steady hands, her patience that had always carried him when his world shook. Selina's hand trailed across his arm. "I want to be Mrs. Blake someday. Doesn't that sound perfect?" The word struck like ice. Anthony's throat tightened, his chest heavy. He tried to respond, but only silence left his lips. Selina laughed, mistaking his pause for agreement. She leaned closer, whispering about yachts and power. Around them, passengers clapped for the musicians, oblivious to the storm brewing at their table. Anthony swallowed hard, unable to escape the weight of his guilt. He didn't know that above them, in her quarters, Diana rehearsed her speech with calm precision. Soon the ballroom would gather, and Selina's dream would shatter under the truth waiting at the stage. The ballroom glowed under chandeliers, walls draped in silk banners. Passengers arrived in glittering gowns and tailored suits, their laughter rising with the music. The air hummed with excitement. Tonight, the ship's mysterious captain would finally be introduced. Anthony adjusted his tie, sweat prickling beneath his collar. Selina twirled beside him, her new diamond necklace catching the light. She posed for more photos, phone raised high. "I want the captain in my story tonight," she giggled. "Imagine the prestige." Anthony managed a weak laugh, unaware of how literal her wish would soon become. Crew members guided passengers to their seats. Waiters moved with trays of wine. An officer's voice rose over the crowd, announcing that the captain would be formally presented. Applause thundered. Anthony's pulse raced. He shifted uncomfortably, hands trembling around his glass. Selina squeezed his arm, whispering about special treatment they might get once the captain knew who he was. He laughed hollowly, the sound swallowed by the rising anticipation. He felt heat in the crowded hall, as if the very walls pressed in on him. Something inside screamed that this moment wasn't just ceremonial, it was judgment. The stage lights brightened, curtains shifting. Footsteps echoed softly against polished marble. A figure waited just behind the veil, calm and unshaken. Anthony didn't know it yet, but his world stood one breath away from collapse. The announcer smiled at the audience, microphone steady in his hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to present your captain." Applause roared. Anthony clapped slowly, distracted, his palms slick with sweat. Selina straightened, phone lifted high, recording every second. The curtains drew back. A tall figure in crisp white uniform stepped forward, polished shoes echoing across the stage. At first, Anthony only saw the silhouette. He blinked, adjusting. Then the spotlight revealed the face. Diana. His jaw dropped, his hand frozen mid-clap. Selina gasped, lowering her phone as her eyes darted between them. Diana stood tall, her badge gleaming, her presence commanding. She smiled politely at the crowd, thanking them with calm grace. Not once did her eyes flicker toward Anthony. Applause roared again, but Anthony heard only the rush of blood in his ears. Time slowed, stretching painfully. His throat tightened, his legs numb. Selina's whisper sliced the silence beside him. "That's your wife?" Anthony couldn't answer. The hall erupted in cheer, but for him, the world had fallen silent. Anthony sat rigid, unable to breathe. The woman he had betrayed, quiet, patient Diana, stood at the center of the stage, commanding applause. She looked every inch the leader, untouchable in her uniform. Selina's grip on his arm tightened, nails digging into his skin. "You lied to me," she hissed. Her voice shook with fury, but Anthony didn't respond. His eyes were locked on Diana, his mind spinning. How had she hidden this? How long had she known? His chest heaved, but no sound escaped. Diana spoke calmly, her voice steady as she greeted the passengers. Her words carried authority, yet no hint of personal betrayal. She addressed the crowd, not him. That dismissal stung worse than anger. Selina pulled at his sleeve. Say something. Do something. He remained frozen. The man who once commanded boardrooms now sat hollow, powerless, watching the life he thought he controlled crumble silently. Selina shoved away from him, her fury rising, but Anthony could not move. He was trapped, nailed to the moment, his entire empire collapsing inside him with no one else aware. Diana's voice filled the ballroom with calm strength. It is my honor to serve as captain on this voyage. Safety, dignity, and trust guide every decision aboard this vessel. Passengers applauded warmly. Anthony sank lower in his seat, sweat trickling down his back. Selina folded her arms, her glare sharp enough to cut glass. Diana continued, outlining safety measures, schedules, and thanking her crew for their loyalty. Every word was professional, precise. Not once did her tone falter. Yet beneath that calm, Anthony felt the weight of her power pressing on him. Every sentence felt like a judgment, though she never looked his way. Her refusal to acknowledge him burned more deeply than rage. When she ended with a dignified bow, applause thundered once more. The hall shimmered with admiration. Anthony sat hollow, realizing the truth. Diana didn't need to expose him. She had already won. Back in their cabin, Selina erupted. She threw her shoes across the room, her voice sharp enough to rattle walls. You tricked me. You let me parade around like a fool while your wife ran the whole damn ship. Anthony tried to explain, words stumbling. I didn't know she. Liar. Selina spat, pacing like a storm. Her diamond necklace glittered under the lamp, mockery in its shine. You're pathetic. You can't even stand up to your wife, and you thought you could handle me? Anthony pressed his hands against his face, the weight of shame crushing him. He wanted to speak, but nothing came. Selina's fury only grew. She slammed her bag shut, her voice trembling with rage. You're weak, Anthony. And I don't waste my time on weak men. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Anthony sat in the silence, the sea rocking gently outside. For the first time, he realized how powerless he truly was. The deck was quiet under the night sky, the sea whispering dark truths. Anthony wandered alone, his hands buried in his pockets, his tie loosened. The stars glittered, indifferent to his turmoil. He leaned against the railing, staring at the waves below. Memories of Diana flooded him, her patience, her sacrifices, her strength. He thought of every time she had carried him, only for him to abandon her for shallow thrills. Regret suffocated him. He whispered her name into the wind, but the sea swallowed it whole. He imagined what she must think of him now, if she thought of him at all. Her calm dismissal at the gala had cut deeper than any confrontation. She hadn't exposed him. She hadn't screamed. She had simply erased him with silence. Anthony gripped the railing until his knuckles turned white. He realized he had traded gold for glitter, loyalty for illusion. And now, he had nothing. Dawn broke across the water, painting the horizon in gold. Diana stood at the bridge, hands steady on the wheel. The ship hummed with life around her, crew moving with respect in their eyes. She watched the sun climb higher, the sea stretching endless and free. For the first time in years, she felt peace. Anthony crossed her mind briefly, but only as a shadow. His betrayal no longer defined her. She had chosen strength over bitterness, dignity over revenge. She whispered softly to herself, the sea doesn't lie. Behind her, officers worked quietly, trusting her command. Ahead, light shimmered across the waves, promising new journeys. Diana smiled, guiding the ship forward. She was no longer Anthony's forgotten wife. She was Captain Diana Blake, master of her destiny, unstoppable. I'm glad you made it to the end. I hope you enjoyed the story. Please go ahead and generously hit that like button and subscribe for more captivating tales like this. We'd love to hear from you. What lessons have you learned from this story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next story. He flaunted his mistress, humiliated his wife, and thought the world would cheer, but when she rose in silence, the empire he built began to crumble. What followed wasn't just revenge, it was a war of dignity, betrayal, and survival that left the world gasping. Don't forget to subscribe, also generously hit the like button cause it means the world to us. Please sit back, relax and enjoy as we dive into the story. Anthony stumbled into his Manhattan apartment, the heavy oak door clicking behind him like a final verdict. The city outside sparkled as if mocking him, each light a reminder of how far he had fallen in only a handful of days. He let his briefcase slide from his hand, hitting the marble floor with a dull thud that echoed through the silent penthouse. The place had never felt so empty. He dropped onto the leather armchair near the window, his head sinking into his palms. The skyline stretched beyond the glass, tall, proud, and merciless. His breath came heavy, as if the air itself wanted to choke him. Diana's face appeared in his memory, sharp and unyielding in that captain's uniform, standing under the bright cruise lights like she owned the entire ocean. Her silence had been louder than any scream, piercing him in front of thousands. Anthony muttered into his hands. She just stood there, steady, cold. And everyone saw it. Everyone. The whispers had followed him back to New York. Investors called in the middle of the night, their voices sharp with doubt. Employees avoided his eyes in the lobby, pretending to check their phones while gossip pulsed between them. His empire, once untouchable, now felt like a sandcastle battered by waves. Dragging himself up, he moved to the bar cart. His fingers trembled as he poured whiskey into a crystal glass. The amber liquid caught the city lights, glinting like the remnants of wealth he feared losing. He drank fast, the burn in his throat the only thing reminding him he was still alive. He staggered to the mirror on the far wall. The reflection startled him. His eyes were bloodshot, his once carefully groomed hair disheveled, his tie still knotted loosely around his neck. This wasn't the Anthony Blake that Forbes had profiled, the man on magazine covers, the man who strutted through boardrooms. This was a ghost, a man stripped of dignity. The phone on the table buzzed. Selina's name lit the screen. He stared at it, jaw clenched. She hadn't spoken to him since the cruise ended. Not once. He let the call ring out, his chest twisting with both anger and dread. He muttered bitterly to the empty room. I built everything, and I lost it in one voyage. He poured another drink and paced the living room. The silence weighed on him. Memories of Diana slipped in uninvited, her laughter in their first years, her hand on his when he struggled to close his first deal, her patient way of balancing their bills when he had nothing. She had been his anchor. And he had cut her loose. Now, alone in the echo of glass walls and city lights, Anthony realized regret wasn't a quiet shadow. It was a storm pounding on his chest, refusing to let him breathe. Miami heat wrapped around Selina's apartment like a suffocating scarf. She sat barefoot on her velvet couch, a half-empty wine glass balanced on her knee. Around her, sequin dresses lay scattered across the floor like broken trophies. The television played silently in the background, replays of Diana's moment on the cruise, her face serene while Selina had burned with humiliation. Selina picked up the remote and muted the screen entirely. She couldn't stand it anymore. Her reflection in the blackened TV stared back at her, makeup smeared, eyes wild, lips curved in a snarl. She hissed under her breath. She thinks she's won. She scrolled through her phone, replaying clips from that night. Anthony drunk, stumbling. Diana calm, collected. The crowd's applause ringing in her memory. It wasn't just that Diana had shown up, it was how she had stolen the narrative, silencing Selina without saying a single word. Selina threw the wine glass at the wall, shards raining across the hardwood floor. Her chest heaved. No one makes a fool of me. No one. She dialed a number, her nails clicking against the screen. A male voice answered, smooth and cautious. Selina, the voice drawled, I wondered when you'd call. I have something, she said, pacing the room. Photos. Videos. The whole mess. Anthony drunk. Diana playing her saint act. Enough to twist the story into whatever we want. The man chuckled softly. And what do you want? Selina's eyes narrowed as she stared out at the Miami skyline. I want her ruined. I want every headline that praised her to rot. She thinks she's untouchable because she stood in silence. I'll turn that silence into a weapon against her. There was a pause on the line. Then the man said, send me what you have. We'll talk numbers. Selina ended the call, her chest tight but her eyes alight with determination. She opened her gallery and scrolled to the hidden folder, photos of Anthony's drunken stumbles, videos of her mocking Diana on the deck, recordings of whispered arguments behind closed doors. She had collected them for her own amusement, but now they were ammunition. She whispered to herself as she uploaded files. The sea isn't finished with us. She won the first wave. I'll drown her in the next. Back in New York, Diana stood under a cascade of camera flashes. Reporters shouted her name, their voices competing with the hum of the city. She smiled politely, her captain's uniform crisp, her posture steady. A journalist pushed forward. "Captain Blake, how does it feel to become a symbol of strength after betrayal?" Diana's lips curved into a calm smile. "Strength is not in the moment of betrayal. It is in how one chooses to respond." The words rippled across news outlets. "Captain Blake, dignity at sea," one headline declared the next morning. Passengers from the cruise wrote glowing testimonials online, describing her grace, her silence, her ability to command without words. The cruise company invited her to corporate dinners, offered her roles on new ships, and flooded her inbox with praise. Yet when the lights faded, Diana sat alone in her hotel suite, the silence pressing heavy. She removed her uniform jacket and laid it carefully across a chair. Her reflection in the window stared back at her, framed by the distant lights of the harbor. She whispered into the quiet. "This is only the beginning." The world celebrated her, but the cost weighed on her chest. She had not sought attention. She had not planned to become a symbol. She only wanted dignity, to stand unbroken. But now she was a headline, a spectacle, a story everyone wanted to twist. Her phone buzzed with messages, old classmates congratulating her, strangers pouring admiration, executives pushing interviews. Diana scrolled through them, her expression unreadable. Fame felt less like recognition and more like exposure. She remembered folding Anthony's shirts in silence, being invisible at his parties. Now the world couldn't look away. She set the phone down and pulled out her journal, writing slowly. "Calm seas never last. Storms always come again. The question is not if, but how you sail through them." Anthony stormed into his company's headquarters, the marble floors echoing under his shoes. Conversations hushed as he passed, eyes darting away but whispers carrying in his wake. His jaw was tight, his shoulders stiff with rage. He shoved into his office, slamming the door. The blinds rattled. He paced, sweat breaking across his brow. The phone on his desk blinked with missed calls. He ignored them. His assistant, a nervous young man, entered with a folder of reports. "Sir, these are the latest investor updates." Anthony snatched the folder and flipped through the pages. His face paled. Investors pulling out. Contracts delayed. Shares dropping. His empire, the empire he had flaunted to Diana, the one he had built as proof he didn't need her, was crumbling faster than he could hold it. He dropped into his chair, the leather creaking under his weight. He buried his face in his hands. Diana's image returned, her calm, her control. She had been the balance he ignored, the quiet strength behind his chaos. Without her, the structure shook. His assistant cleared his throat softly. "There are also media requests. They want a statement about the cruise." Anthony shot him a glare sharp enough to silence him. "Get out." The assistant fled, leaving Anthony alone with his spiraling thoughts. He stared at his reflection in the glass window. A broken man stared back. "I can fix this," he muttered to himself, but the words felt empty. He poured whiskey into a glass with shaking hands, the liquid spilling over. He drank until the burn numbed him. Betrayal, he realized, wasn't a private wound. It was poison, seeping into every corner of his empire, every relationship, every reflection of himself. The Miami lounge was dimly lit, its air thick with cigar smoke and murmurs of deals. Selena sat at a corner table, her dress glittering under the low lights. Across from her, Victor Hale leaned back, a smile tugging at his lips. She slid her phone across the table. "Look at these." Victor picked it up, scrolling through photos and clips, Anthony slurring, Diana commanding, Selena laughing. His grin widened. "This is gold." Selena leaned closer, her perfume mingling with the smoke. "I don't just want Diana's story exposed. I want her ruined." Victor raised a brow. "Ruined? Or just knocked off her pedestal?" "Ruined," Selena said flatly, her eyes hard. "I want her name dragged through every gutter until no one can say it without sneering. She stole my spotlight. I'll steal her dignity." Victor tapped his chin thoughtfully. "Headlines, interviews, whispers in the right circles, I can make it happen. But it won't be cheap." Selena smiled coldly. "Money is nothing compared to revenge." She sipped her martini slowly, savoring the bitterness. She had transformed humiliation into a weapon. Anthony was collateral. Diana was the target. Victor leaned forward, his voice smooth. Careful what you ask for. Storms don't always hit the ship you aim at. Sometimes they circle back. Selina's smile widened. Let them. I was born for fire. The boardroom gleamed with glass walls and polished mahogany. Executives sat around the long table, their suits sharp, their smiles sharper. At the head sat Diana, uniform still crisp, posture steady. They applauded her as if she had conquered the world. Captain Blake, one executive began, his voice warm but rehearsed, you've become the face of resilience. Our passengers are demanding more cruises under your command. Media outlets are begging for your story. This is opportunity, and we'd be foolish not to maximize it. Diana nodded politely, though her chest tightened. She hadn't sought this. She never craved interviews or branding campaigns. She wanted the sea, not the stage. Another voice chimed in. Imagine, billboards with your image. Ads with your silence as a symbol of dignity. A book deal, perhaps. A partnership with networks. Their voices overlapped, contracts, promotions, global exposure. The room buzzed with greed disguised as admiration. Diana listened, her face calm, but her soul restless. When the meeting ended, she stepped outside alone. The harbor air hit her face, salty and sharp. Ships anchored nearby swayed gently, their hulls catching the sunset. She breathed deeply, longing for the deck beneath her feet, the ocean's honesty. Walking slowly along the pier, she whispered to herself. Do they love me, or my story? A group of strangers recognized her. Phones lifted, camera flashes sparked. Questions were shouted, did she plan it? Was she seeking fame? Diana forced a small smile, escaping quickly. Back at her hotel, she sat at the small desk, pulling out her journal. She wrote slowly, her hand steady, the sea doesn't lie. People do. Calm waters are never permanent, storms always wait. Straightening her uniform jacket, she stared at her reflection in the mirror. The woman who once folded shirts in silence was now a spectacle. She whispered firmly, I'll face storms with dignity. Always. Anthony's penthouse no longer glowed with wealth. Curtains were drawn, light shut out. Empty whiskey bottles lay scattered across the marble floor. The man who once commanded boardrooms now sat slouched on a sofa, staring at old photos. One frame held Diana's smile, years ago, before the empire, before Selina. She wore a simple dress, laughter in her eyes. Anthony traced the glass with his finger, his chest tightening. She carried me, he muttered. And I broke her. His phone buzzed. Selina's name appeared. He let it ring. Again, and again. Each vibration felt like a hammer on his skull. He finally turned it over, face down. He didn't want to hear her voice. He feared what she might unleash. Dragging himself to the balcony, he lit a cigarette, coughing on the first inhale. The city stretched before him, indifferent. Once, those lights reflected his triumph. Now they mocked him. Inside, he poured another drink. The silence pressed heavy, like punishment. He remembered Diana's patience, how she stayed up balancing accounts, how she kept faith when investors doubted him. He remembered her hands, steady, folding his suits, while he plotted ways to outshine her quiet strength. Now, without her, his empire cracked. His pride had been his fortress, but the walls collapsed, leaving him exposed. He whispered bitterly, the city moves on. They don't care. No one cares. Tears burned his eyes. He pressed his palms to his face, ashamed of the man he had become. The powerful Anthony Blake was gone. In his place sat a hollow figure, stripped bare, haunted by betrayal of his own making. Victor Hale's office was dim, lined with shelves of scandalous headlines. Selina sat across from him, legs crossed, eyes sharp. She slid her phone across his desk. He watched the clips, Anthony stumbling drunk, Diana commanding the stage, Selina mocking behind closed doors. Victor leaned back, smiling. This is gold. The world loves a scandal, but a scandal with a captain's uniform? That's priceless. Selina's lips curved. I don't want priceless. I want ruin. I want Diana's silence turned against her. Make her look like she planned it, like she staged everything for fame. Victor chuckled. You're dangerous. I'm effective, she replied coldly. Within days, headlines erupted: the billionaire, the mistress, and the captain wife. Articles twisted Diana's dignity into calculation. Selena granted interviews, painting herself as the victim of Anthony's lies, claiming she too had been betrayed. She knew all along, she told cameras, eyes glistening with rehearsed tears. She trapped us both. Public opinion split. Some praised Diana's composure, others whispered doubt. Forums filled with speculation, talk shows debated motives. Anthony watched the headlines, horror spreading across his face. Selena had used him as bait, Diana as the prey. He tried calling her, but she blocked him. Alone, he slammed his fist on the table, fury boiling. Diana's triumph was being twisted, her silence weaponized. Selena had lit the fire, and the world was feeding on the flames. The cafe smelled of roasted beans and fresh pastries. Diana stepped inside quietly, hoping for a moment of peace. She ordered tea, found a corner seat, and opened her journal. A woman approached hesitantly, eyes sharp. "Excuse me. Are you the wife who trapped her husband?" Diana's pen froze. Her chest tightened. She looked up, meeting the stranger's accusing eyes. No words came. She closed her journal and stood, leaving the tea untouched. Outside, cameras flashed suddenly. Paparazzi swarmed, shouting questions. "Captain Blake, did you plan it? Was it staged?" Microphones shoved toward her face. She raised a hand, shielding herself, pushing through the crowd until a driver pulled her into a waiting car. Inside, her phone buzzed relentlessly, friends calling, colleagues messaging, reporters demanding comments. She turned it off, her chest heavy. Back at the hotel, she sat at her desk, pen trembling as she wrote, "Selena." Her silence had once been her strength, but now the world painted it as scheming. Rage threatened to spill, but she refused. Discipline kept her calm. She whispered to the empty room, "The sea doesn't chase storms. It outlasts them." Her heart ached, but her resolve sharpened. She would endure, no matter how twisted the headlines became. The city slept while Anthony sat in darkness, phone in hand. His fingers trembled as he scrolled to Diana's number. He hesitated, poured whiskey, drank, and finally pressed call. The line rang, then clicked. Her voice answered, calm, steady. "Anthony." His breath caught. "Diana, please, I never meant for it to," his voice cracked. She cut him off gently but firmly. "Stop. You betrayed me. That's the truth." Silence stretched. His throat tightened. He tried again, desperation spilling. "She's ruining us both. I can't fight her alone. Help me." Her eyes filled with tears she refused to shed. "You chose her," she whispered, her tone steady but cold. "Now live with her consequences." She ended the call. Her phone slipped from her hand, tears finally escaping down her cheeks. In his apartment, Anthony dropped the phone onto the floor, his chest caving. He sobbed, the sound raw and broken. Once, he had strutted above the world. Now, he was begging at the gates of the woman he betrayed, denied the shield she had once been. Diana was no longer his fortress. She was her own. And he was left in ruins. Studio lights paint Selena in buttery gold while a handler dusts powder along her jaw. The producer counts down with fingers, and the red tally light blinks alive. She lifts her chin as if the camera were a mirror, voice softened into a tremble that sounds almost sincere. She speaks of heartbreak the way a jeweler speaks of facets, turning each cut to catch sympathy, never once letting the light fall on herself too long. The host leans in, playing confessor. The audience hums with that warm electricity of borrowed pain. She tells America that she was deceived too, that love had made a fool of her, that she only discovered the wife on the night the wife walked out like a storm in silk. She calls Diana admirable and then, without moving a muscle, suggests calculation. She calls Anthony brilliant and then suggests instability. She cries without smudging mascara. She apologizes to no one. The segment ends with applause that sounds like a flock rising from a field. Back in the green room she removes earrings and replaces the tremble with a smile sharp enough to trim glass. Her manager shows charts climbing in real time, followers, brand pings, inbound from a publisher who wants a chapter outlined by morning. There is a club expecting her later, a champagne tower will be waiting with camera phones above it like a field of metal flowers. Her phone buzzes with men who want to orbit her, with women who want to learn her audacity, with bloggers who want to monetize her tears. She forgets to eat, remembers to post, and practices a smaller, humbler smile for the ride down the elevator. In the tinted SUV she scrolls comments that call her survivor, icon, phoenix. She likes the ones that say she handled humiliation like a queen. She rereads them as if they were scripture. When the SUV glides to a stop outside the club, a roar lifts. She steps into it as if it were silk. In the strobe of cameras, her shame oxidizes into sheen. She thinks only of up and never of down. She tells herself the ocean is behind her, that no wave will return. A studio on the 20th floor, glass on 3 sides and a skyline that could swallow a person whole. Diana sits with hands folded, uniform pressed to a geometric perfection that suggests the ship is within her as much as she is within it. The host begins gently, then nudges. Did you choreograph your silence? Did you intend spectacle? She answers without hurry, voice steady enough to dock a city, saying that dignity is not a strategy but a posture, that command is service, that the hardest thing a person can do with pain is not trade it for a headline. Commercial break. A makeup artist offers a tissue, she declines with a small thank you, presses 2 fingers to her temple, breathes until the lungs remember their work. Floor managers chatter. A tech adjusts her mic, murmuring that his wife watched the cruise clip twice and sat up straighter both times. He says it without fanfare. It lands on her like a blessing anyway. Back on air, the host reaches for a rumor and she refuses to touch it, redirecting to crew training, to safety drills in rough weather, to the way passengers become a single community when a storm moans through the hull. She tells a story of a grandmother clutching a rosary and a child offering a seasick sticker in solemn silence. The audience laughs, then quiets. The red light dies. A producer mouths perfect. Outside, the street is a corridor of noise, someone calls schemer, someone else calls saint, phones become periscopes, curiosity is a tide. Her driver angles the sedan close. Inside, the hush is sudden and absolute. She leans her head back, letting jaw tension dissolve. In her lap the phone vibrates with invitations she will ignore. She opens the Notes app and types a single line. Do not mistake attention for respect. At the hotel she unbuttons the jacket with the same patient care she uses to take a ship off a crosswind. The mirror returns a woman who looks like consequence, the kind that follows after chaos, the kind that doesn't shout. She sits with her journal and writes a page about ballast and the mathematics of keeping a vessel true. Between the lines the ink admits a private ache, the cost of being emblem when she once wanted only to be good at her work. The boardroom that once vibrated at Anthony's frequency now contains a different weather. Chairs squeak away from the table as directors arrange their faces into a delicate mixture of regret and resolve. Presentations advance with the quiet violence of numbers, trendlines stuttering downward, client churn charted as neat red exits, sentiment analysis crusted with adjectives investors do not like to see. He speaks over a graph and hears his voice thin, a string played too hard. They call a vote with the clinical warmth of a hospital. Hands lift. Eyes do not meet his. The legal counsel reads language he will not remember correctly later, the sentence that removes him from the helm and lets the ship of his company drift away under a new name he never loved. It is very civilized, the way a museum might remove a painting that turned out not to be authentic. He walks the hallway carrying a box that contains a framed cover story, a pen gifted by a man whose fund is now elsewhere, a ceramic dish Diana once placed on his desk for paper clips because chaos exhausted her. He pauses in the doorway that used to be his future. Assistants look down. A security badge blinks red and stays red. Outside, the air is raw, the kind that makes a person count their ribs. A photographer shouts a question designed to bruise. He keeps moving. In the car he places the box on the passenger seat and drives without destination until the bridge shoulder offers a view he cannot afford, the river hustling, the facades unbothered. Along the railing a jogger passes, earbuds sealing him into a private drumline. The city continues its metronome unfazed. At home, silence arrives before he does. The penthouse is full of corners he used to fill with parties, now every corner holds the shape of an absence. He arranges the paper-clip dish on a bare desk as if it might anchor something invisible. He tries to pray to no one in particular. It comes out as breath fogging the window, as a thought he refuses to name, if she had been here, would the floor still be under me? Gala light makes diamonds perform. Selena's dress is a metallic argument with mercy, she floats through tables like a small planet tugging praise into orbit. On stage, a benefactor calls her philanthropist for donating photographs to a silent auction. She smiles with the exact wattage a headline requires. It is almost easy until the journalist from the magazine with the sly covers corners her by a column and asks for a word. He shows a phone with muted audio, a curtain half-closed somewhere backstage, a reflection in a window giving away angle, Selena caricaturing Diana with a stiff jaw, calling her a boring shipwife, calling silence a stunt, calling the room gullible. The journalist's eyebrows lift in the particular sympathy of people who are about to publish. She smooths the air with her palm and suggests context, suggests humor, suggests deep misunderstanding. By morning the clip lives in every pocket. Sponsors respond with the efficiency of sprinklers shutting off a wing, pausing, reconsidering, stepping back. Her manager writes calm down in a thread that is anything but calm. She throws a glass, it scars the wall and then stares back at her as if it were an eye. Outside the building, cameras have learned a new song. The new captions taste of accusation. A neighbor, usually sweet, hurries their dog past her with averted face. She spends an afternoon composing an apology that refuses to kneel and a statement that refuses to admit. She posts one and deletes it and posts the other and deletes that too. The algorithm eats indecision. Night finds her fetal on a white sofa, surrounded by gold that looks counterfeit under this kind of dark. She stares at the phone like a gambler stares at the door. Through the window Miami is a painting of motion. She wills the tide to return, for the fickle sea of attention to swoop back and lift her higher. Somewhere inside the wish is the stubborn certainty that she deserves rescue more than most. A quiet knock, and the desk clerk hands Diana a small envelope with a tremor that does not belong to him. The handwriting is a ghost she recognizes. She sits by the window with the letter flat in her palm as if it were a compass that might point to where the past has drifted. She reads apologies shaped like confession, sentences that list the forms of blindness as if listing them might ward them off, a final line that asks for forgiveness without asking for return. He declares himself ruined enough times that the word turns thin. He admits the arithmetic of their life had always relied on her steadiness. He uses the word please once and it looks new on him. She does not cry. She is not stone either. She folds the letter along the places where paper would choose to fold if paper could choose. She places it inside the journal between pages where she has drawn rough maps of wind and notes about the way shame can mimic weather. She stands and opens the sliding glass door and lets air move around her like a promise. The harbor below is a clock she knows how to read. A gull writes its quick script across sky. She rests her palms on the railing and lets the ache exist as texture rather than headline. She thinks of forgiveness not as pardon but as an unclenching, a release of the rope that burns the hands of the one who will not let it go. She tells herself she can choose peace later and that later can be a long time and still be hers. When she dresses for a meeting, she tucks the journal away. The uniform's weight settles on her shoulders like something ancient and earned. The mirror returns a woman not improved by pain but altered. She nods to the reflection as if to a colleague. The day waits. She steps into it without fanfare. Victor Hale's office is a cool aquarium for predators, nothing moves without watching something else. He finds Anthony at the end of a week that has ground him down to rudiments, hair not obeying, tie abandoned, the smell of a shirt waiting for a reason. Victor pours espresso like one pours bait into water and suggests a conversation shaped like salvation. He says the public loves a redemption arc, that narratives are currency, that if you don't write yours someone else will. He uses words like nuance and both sides and reckoning. He slides a folder across the desk, the contract is thin because the hook is hidden. He calls the piece My Wife's Betrayal and tries to make it sound compassionate, as if the real subject is heartbreak rather than leverage. Anthony refuses twice and then says he will think. Thinking turns into reading, reading into signing, signing into a noise the internet makes when it discovers fresh sugar. The article lands with the slap of a fish on a dock, shiny, wriggling, attracting gulls. He tells himself he is correcting the record. On page 4 his sentences begin to bend to the structure Victor wants. Somewhere a copy editor trims his remorse into a shape that sells. Diana's name blooms again in thumbnails. She feels the old nausea and then steadies herself with a hand on the back of a chair, as if the room had encountered chop. She reads enough to recognize the angle, then stops. She thinks of the sea, which takes credit for nothing and blames nothing else for its temper. Victor lights a cigarette with triumph disguised as routine. He opens a spreadsheet that tracks clicks in a rising stare and pretends not to notice the note of rot at the base of what he's built. He tells himself tides obey no one, neglecting to admit he has been throwing rocks at the moon to see if it will flinch. Chapter 17, Diana's Ally. The conference ballroom hums with maritime vernacular. Models of new hulls sit on tables like sculptures, the coffee tastes of ambition. Diana moves through conversations carrying the quiet authority of someone who knows the underside of storms. A man with silver hair and the eyes of a patient engineer waits for his moment and introduces himself as Samuel Ortiz, investor by trade, student of captains by fascination. He speaks not of branding but of apprenticeship, proposes a program for training women to command, offers resources and stays out of the spotlight in the same sentence. He asks how she would design a curriculum for judgment under pressure and how she would teach calm to people who have never been invited to speak loudly. He does not compliment the clip from the cruise and she likes him for that. He admires the way she answers the question he didn't ask. They walk the mezzanine where banners float like sails. He describes a fleet he hopes to modernize, a scholarship that would bear no one's name but the sailors who earn it. He mentions a training simulator that smells like salt and failure until a cadet gets it right. He says the industry is overdue for a different kind of spine. She hears sincerity over salesmanship and says yes, but careful. Later, in her room, she puts the partnership in ink, drawing boxes and arrows, writing the word harbor beside the word school as if placing them near each other could create one. She finds herself smiling without noticing. She considers how legacy can be constructed without vengeance as its cornerstone. The horizon lifts a little inside her. Past midnight, Selena sits beneath a chandelier that looks like a frozen rainfall and stares at the math of loss. Brand contracts paused. Publisher cooling. Photographers turning their lenses an inch away. The elevator button brings her down to the lobby and then a car, and then the city, which no longer opens like a flower. She dials Anthony and hears the emptiness of a ring that will not be picked up. She tries again until the emptiness becomes a verdict. Pride tastes metallic, she swallows and calls anyway. When he answers at last, his voice feels sanded down. He tells her they are finished. He says he does not have a self to offer her even if he wanted to. She says there is a way back for both of them. He laughs, an animal sound, and ends the call. Rage makes a circle in the room. She chooses a revenge that will punish him even as it scorches her. She posts photographs of him fallen out of evenings, debts stapled together, a video of a door kicked because a key was lost to a different woman. The traffic is instant, predatory, delighted. She becomes part of the spectacle she once controlled. She doubles down. It is the only move left in a game she refuses to admit she is losing. By dawn the comments have turned cruel in plural directions. She watches them like weather, convinced a break in the cloud must arrive. At noon she makes coffee with hands that tremble. At 3 she regrets nothing out loud and everything in the tendon that tugs hard behind her sternum. At 5 a florist delivers lilies no one ordered. They look like surrender and smell like funerals. There is a moment when a man's knees are the only honest part of him. Anthony finds his near the sliding door, the phone in fractal pieces across the floor after it met the wall. The images of himself have escaped the frame and chase him down corridors of memory thought hidden. He sits with the raw knowledge that he is everyone's entertainment. On the balcony the city is theatrical without him. He steps out wearing the shame of daylight. A wind climbs the building and unbuttons the heat. He stands at the rail and reads the hectares of glass like water, surface, depth, danger. A thought visits that he does not invite. It lingers anyway. He backs away to the couch and folds forward, forehead to forearm, breath going ragged. The room offers no sermon. He thinks of the first apartment with Diana, of pasta boiling over, of her laughing in the steam, of a note she left on the fridge the night he closed his first ridiculous deal, proud in ink that looped. He thinks of the shape of her absence more than the shape of her face. He admits aloud that he built a life with weak bolts. Evening arrives with a blue that forgives nothing. He showers without recognizing the body he has become, wears a t-shirt he never wore outside, stares at the door like it owes him an apology. A text arrives from a number not in his phone, the sentence is a stranger's prayer. He sets the device face down, sits on the floor, lets fatigue end the argument with consciousness. Sleep takes him only halfway into dark, then returns him to the room to begin again. A ribbon stretches between 2 chrome posts in a refurbished dockyard that smells of sawdust, machine grease, and new beginnings. The banner reads Maritime Leadership Academy and the first cohort gathers with notebooks and nerves. They are bright with that particular courage of people who have been told no with a smile and came anyway. Cameras flash, Diana stands straight not for the photos but for the girls watching from a distance who will one day bring their weight to a wheel. She speaks without flourish about discipline and weather, about how command is not domination but its opposite, how a good captain listens longer than she speaks, how the sea respects only truth and the work you do when no one is recording. Samuel stands to the side, hands in pockets, his pride measured rather than loud. The mayor tries a joke about anchors and gets a laugh, the harbor cranes nod like tall, rusty uncles. Tour of the simulator lab, walls that vibrate with program swell, a console that replicates panic until a student learns to breathe through it and answer with muscle memory. A young cadet asks what to do when a crewman underestimates you on purpose. Diana tells a story about a bosun who did not like women and how yes became easier for him once he saw his paycheck arrive in weather he had thought impossible. The room exhales. Reporters ask about scandal and she redirects to scholarship applications. They ask about the man whose last name she still carries and she redirects to scholarship recipients' last names and how the school intends to change them on letterheads across oceans. By dusk, the bit players have drifted home and the yard lights hum on. She stands alone with the building and thanks it for the work it will do. On the walk back to her car, a girl from the cohort hurries to catch up, breathless gratitude tumbling out. She says that seeing Diana on the ship helped her leave a job where she was paid to apologize for existing. She says her mother cried watching the clip because it felt like a door opening. Diana hears it, receives it, stores it next to the quiet place where she keeps the names of storms. Screenshots arrive like a flock, subject lines from Victor to Selena, wire confirmations wearing false mustaches as consulting fees, draft attachments with phrases nobody writes by accident, stage the optics, lean into victim, drip next week. A whistleblower chooses a burner account and a timing window and the internet becomes an evidence board. The story erupts not like a flare but like a sinkhole. Brand representatives switch from wellness vocabulary to compliance vocabulary. A network that booked Selena for a reunion special slides her name out of the Chiron with the discretion of thieves. Victor issues a statement about being misled by a source who took advantage of his journalistic zeal. The sentence clangs against the floor. Comment sections perform autopsy. Selena locks her door twice and drags a chair beneath the knob as if that could hold back a tide. She wanders her rooms without seeing their shapes, pauses at mirrors only long enough to smack the light off. The phone vibrates until it grows hot and then sulks. Her manager writes we need to meet. She writes not now and then throws the device onto a chair where it looks like a small animal refusing to die. She thinks of the moment the first studio light kissed her rise and how she had opened like a flower trained on attention. Now the light feels like interrogation. She tries to compose a letter to her version of truth and discovers the ink has coagulated. She imagines Diana somewhere not thinking of her at all and finds that image more annihilating than any headline. Victor takes a call from counsel who talks in paragraphs about exposure. He stares at the skyline and tells himself he is a weather system, not a man, as if that absolves the debris his winds have lifted and thrown. The apartment he can afford now has a window that looks at brick and a sink that whistles when it's tired. He fills out a form at a shipping yard office where a woman with reading glasses asks if he has any experience and he says his father did, which is not the same, but the yard needs backs and his looks usable. She tells him to buy gloves that fit before his hands learn the lesson another way. First shift. Pallets and forklifts talk in a language he starts to remember from childhood Saturdays when his father came home with stories that smelled like rope and diesel. He learns the rhythm of load and lift, learns where not to place his feet, learns the relief of instruction that does not require a press release. A foreman calls him college boy until the nickname melts into something not unkind. Lunch in a circle of plastic chairs. A man from Veracruz tells a joke that does not translate and is funny anyway. A woman with a laugh like a motorcycle warns him about the pallet that looks fine until it breaks. They ask about his past and he edits it down until it fits the weather. He eats an apple with the religious attention of a person who had forgotten hunger can be honest. At night he sleeps without the old rehearsals of spin. His muscles wake him to argue. Then go back to work repairing. He does not feel noble. He feels smaller in a way that lets air into the room. He stands at the mirror in the morning and shaves like a man making himself acceptable to a decent day, not a magazine. When the check clears, he buys boots that will not betray him in the rain. A new ship breathes at the dock, lights along her rails blinking slow like a heartbeat. Crew in fresh uniforms move as a practice choreography, passengers arrive with little mountains of luggage and the delicate hope that the week ahead will soften something inside them. Diana walks the gangway and hears the small applause that a rumor makes when it discovers itself true. She nods once, offers a few words about safety as kindness, and feels the deck under her shoe like a home that remembers her weight. On the bridge, glass wraps around the horizon she missed as if the world were a bowl and she the spoon about to stir it. The first mate gives her the weather and she gives him the plan, not as orders but as sentences that invite competence. They ease free of the berth with a nudge to thrusters and a patience that turns tonnage into grace. The channel opens, the city tilts backward, the ship clears her throat and becomes motion. Evening, the dining room singing silver, somewhere a couple reconciles over soup, somewhere a child discovers how far a corridor can echo if you run fast enough. She makes rounds not as a celebrity but as a presence. At the bow she pauses while the wind tries its trick at stealing breath. She obliges, then takes it back. In her quarters she opens the journal and writes a single line, "This water knows me," and lets the rest of the page remain blank because some days ask for fewer words. She sleeps with one ear to the hum, as captains do. At dawn she is on the wing deck with coffee steaming and the horizon doing its patient miracle. She thanks the sea for being impossible to own. Anthony writes at a kitchen table with a wobbly leg. He begins 3 times and finds a fourth voice, one that does not audition for pity or permission. He describes the harm without embroidery. He tells the truth he can stand. He does not ask to be taken back into any old room. He asks only to let go. The page absorbs it all with the stoicism of paper. He places the letter in an envelope and writes her name with careful penmanship learned in a school where neatness once counted. He addresses it and holds it to his chest as if that could transmit the intention. He imagines the mail slot opening, the letter sliding into the hidden rivers of the postal world, the way it would arrive in her hands as an object his hands once warmed. He lights a candle instead. The flame is a little priest. He feeds the edge of the envelope to it and watches fire read his confession faster than any human would. Ash lets go with a sigh. He opens the window and offers what is left to the outside air. It lifts and disperses. The room smells like a moment he will remember as a hinge. He sits in the quiet that follows and is surprised by the absence of the ache he rehearsed. Not peace exactly. A clearing. He washes the mug, wipes the table, straightens the wobbly leg with folded cardboard, and goes to bed without chasing the past down its usual alleys. Sleep arrives like a dog that finally trusts again. Dawn rubs gold along the sea's long eyelid. On the bridge, instruments glow like small obedient planets. Diana rests her palms on the rail of the wing and lets the air right cool on her skin. The ship moves in that confident way of things built to move. Far out, a freighter chisels a darker line. Closer in, a pod of dolphins rehearses joy. She thinks not of headlines but of checklists. Not of the woman who broke herself on fame but of cadets grappling with the simulator's first storm. Not of the man on the shore lifting boxes but of what weight does to character when it is carried day after day without applause. She grants them each a blessing that does not need to be heard to become true. A passenger appears, an older woman wearing a scarf that maps the sky in constellations, and asks if captains ever cry. Diana smiles with the softness of one who knows the answer is yes and also knows the second answer, not where it would spill on the deck. They trade a few words about courage disguised as ordinary chores. The woman returns to her breakfast, Diana returns to her watch. The sun climbs and the sea consents to sparkle. She feels herself placed correctly within the machinery of morning. No thunderhead on the radar, just the endless arithmetic of water and distance, of time kept and time forgiven. She lifts the binoculars and then lowers them, preferring the naked eye. She does not rehearse her title, though it fits. She is not a symbol, though some will insist. She is a worker in a bright room that never ends. She is a woman who did not drown when the story tried to pull her under. She is hands steady on a wheel that is older than marriage and younger than grief. Ahead, the horizon behaves as always, retreating to invite pursuit, promising without boasting, a straight line the world draws to show you where to go. She checks course, tilts a degree to honor wind, and says a sentence only the ship can hear. The vessel answers by moving forward. The day opens. The sea accepts. The girl she used to be nods once from some interior deck and keeps walking. The captain does what she has always done when storms exhausted themselves and gossip fell silent. She goes to work. She takes people safely across. She keeps her gaze level. She adds this morning to the ledger of mornings. And as the hull rolls through a long, slow swell, she lets a small, private joy crest inside her and break without making a sound. I'm glad you made it to the end. I hope you enjoyed the story. Please go ahead and generously hit that like button and subscribe for more captivating tales like this. We'd love to hear from you. What lessons have you learned from this story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next story. He betrayed her with glitter, flaunted his mistress, and thought she'd drown in silence. But when she rose, storms followed. Empires collapsed, reputations shattered, and the ocean itself seemed to roar with her vengeance. Don't forget to subscribe, also generously hit the like button cause it means the world to us. Please sit back, relax and enjoy as we dive into the story. Night rolled over New York like a restless tide, swallowing the city in neon and silence. From the 20th floor of her hotel, Diana Blake leaned on the balcony rail, eyes fixed on the harbor lights below. They flickered like whispers, blinking out one by one across the water. She should have felt peace, applause had followed her, journalists had written about her dignity, and the company had elevated her name, but something gnawed beneath her ribs. The city was alive yet indifferent. Taxi horns blared in the avenues below, strangers rushed across crosswalks, but the ocean remained her compass. She whispered to it in her mind, asking if storms ever truly ended. The night air gave no reply, only the faint smell of diesel and salt drifting from the docks. Inside, the television muttered. A news anchor replayed a clip from her last conference. The same words looped again, Captain Blake, symbol of dignity after betrayal. Diana muted it, unable to endure her life turned into a headline. She turned the screen black, catching her own reflection staring back. Across the city, another reflection glimmered, Victor Hale in his Manhattan office. The blinds were drawn tight against dawn, cigarette smoke curling into shadows. He leaned over a mahogany desk buried under files thick with secrets, crew testimonies that had been silenced, contracts signed in desperation, settlement letters where ink had been paid to erase shame. His fingers tapped a rhythm as he flipped pages. Then one document stopped him cold. The contract bore the name of a board member tied to Diana's shipping line, a name signed long before she became captain. Victor's lips curved into a smile that was half shadow, half flame. He whispered the word leverage as if it were prayer. For months he had been humiliated, his empire of scandal exposed. But scandal was currency, and he had hoarded enough to buy relevance again. In Miami, neon pulsed against Selena's window like a heartbeat. She sat on her marble floor, empty champagne bottles crowding around her legs like vultures. She dragged crimson lipstick across her mirror, scrawling Diana's name in angry strokes. Her reflection fractured across the cracks in the glass, one half sneering, the other tear-streaked. The world had mocked her, but bitterness smoldered hotter than shame. You took everything, she hissed into her reflection, voice raw. She replayed the moment Diana had walked onto that stage, proud in her uniform, while Selena stood blindsided, humiliated. Every replay twisted like glass inside her chest. Her phone buzzed with Victor's name. She read the message once, twice, meet me. Midnight. She smirked, wiping her tears with diamond-stained fingers. Meanwhile, Anthony slept in his bare apartment uptown, exhaustion pressing him into the thin mattress. His palms blistered from hauling crates, his once proud shoulders bent under honest labor. The city's noise didn't wake him, but his dreams were heavy, Diana's laughter, Selena's perfume, Victor's smirk, memories braided with regret. The world believed their saga had ended, but whispers rose again. Dockside chatter carried stories of Victor digging. Boardrooms hummed with suspicion. Gossip swelled like waves before a storm. Diana closed her eyes on the balcony, unaware of how close the tide was turning. Somewhere in her marrow, though, she felt it, the ocean never slept. It waited, restless. And as midnight approached, New York's skyline seemed to lean closer, listening, as secrets crawled out of shadows to breathe again. Victor Hale's office was a cathedral to shadows. He preferred it that way, dark blinds sealed against the morning, only the amber glow of a desk lamp pouring over stacks of paper. The city pulsed outside, but here silence reigned, heavy and deliberate. The file lay open before him like scripture. Its spine was cracked from years of being shuffled, buried, protected. Inside were names that once feared daylight, lawyers, captains, investors, whispers of cover-ups that never saw headlines. Victor had gathered them carefully over a decade, waiting for the right storm. He skimmed with the patience of a surgeon. A letter slipped free, a crewman's testimony silenced with money. Another page revealed boardroom betrayals hidden under confidentiality agreements. And then came the page that made him pause. It was a contract signed years before Diana rose as captain. A signature tied her shipping line to a scandal no one had dared uncover. The ink was faded, but the name gleamed, a board member notorious for undercutting safety standards, the kind of sin that could sink reputations. Victor whispered the word leverage, tasting it like aged wine. His reflection in the glass window looked half ghost, half devil. He imagined headlines already, Captain Blake's empire built on buried secrets. He reached for the phone, dialing slowly. A voice answered, groggy. Victor's tone turned silk over steel. "We're not finished with Blake," he murmured. "Prepare the presses." When he hung up, he leaned back in his leather chair, cigar smoke swirling like secrets. He poured himself whiskey at 9 in the morning, ice clinking like applause. Months of humiliation had scarred him, investigations, lawsuits, his name smeared. But he lived for resurrection. And scandal was his altar. The ocean outside the harbor slapped against hulls as if clapping for him, mocking or encouraging, he didn't care. He felt alive again. Miami's neon throbbed against Selena's penthouse windows, painting the marble floor in violent colors. She sat cross-legged amid empty glasses, her hair tangled, mascara smudged like war paint. Around her, luxury handbags spilled their contents, gowns lay crumpled like corpses. Her reflection in the cracked mirror stared back with venom. Once, she had been the darling of tabloids, her smile printed on billboards, her name dripping from champagne lips. Now, headlines mocked her, sponsors fled, and whispers followed her like ghosts. Still, bitterness burned hotter than shame. She uncapped lipstick, dragging it across the mirror. The name Diana smeared in thick red strokes. Selena hissed, "You stole my crown." The mirror fractured further under the pressure of her hand, splitting her face into shards, one sneering, one sobbing. She picked up a glass, tossed it against the wall, watching it explode into glittering fragments. The sound soothed her rage. Her phone buzzed. Victor's message flashed, "Meet me. Midnight. Manhattan." Her lips curved into a smirk, wiping a tear with diamond-stained fingers. Partnership with Victor promised fire, though fire always consumed. She stood, slipping into a black dress cut sharp enough to wound, heels clicking like gunshots. Her eyes were painted dark, heavy with vengeance. As she adjusted her earrings, she whispered to her fractured reflection, "If I fall, she burns with me." The cracked mirror reflected back a woman reborn not as victim, but as predator. The ocean shimmered beyond the glass, mocking her vow. She didn't notice. She was too busy preparing for war. At dawn, the shipping yard roared alive. Forklifts groaned, chains rattled, crates slammed onto wet concrete. Anthony's palms burned beneath fraying gloves, every lift carving fire into his muscles. Sweat streaked down his dark skin, soaking his once tailored shirt now faded and torn. Dock workers shouted, their voices merging with the metallic clank of labor. Anthony moved slower than the others, unused to this rhythm, but determination kept him upright. His shoulders, once symbols of pride, bent beneath the weight of penance. During break, he sat on a crate, gnawing on a simple apple. He watched ships bob in the harbor, their hulls steady despite the chaos. Memories stabbed, Diana balancing accounts late at night, Selena's perfume in boardrooms, Victor's sly grin. Regret wrapped him like chains he couldn't break. A dock worker dropped beside him, lighting a cigarette. "Word is, that scandal guy's digging again," the man muttered. "Hail. And the mistress? She ain't done either." Anthony's stomach tightened. He pictured Diana, calm as ever, her silence wielded like armor. She didn't know storms were circling again. He muttered, "I carried empires and lost them. She carried me, and I broke her." That night, back in his bare apartment, he scribbled a note on crumpled paper, "Diana, watch the horizon. They're plotting." He stared at the words until his chest ached. Then he crushed it in his fist, fear and guilt choking courage. The paper landed in the trash. He collapsed onto the mattress, hands trembling. Silence, once his weapon, now threatened to kill them both. The ship rocked gently against the harbor tide, moonlight painting silver paths across restless waves. Diana sat at her cabin desk, journals stacked neatly like anchors. Her pen hovered over a blank page, but peace refused to catch. The phone rang, a restricted number flashing across the screen. She answered, voice steady despite the late hour. A stranger's voice, low and cryptic, hissed through the line, "Captain Blake, storms don't only come from the sea." The line went dead. Her chest tightened, but her hands never trembled. She rose, uniform jacket straightening with her posture. She stepped out onto the deck, moonlight spilling over her, waves restless under her gaze. Crew members moved quietly, whispering her name with reverence. But shadows circled louder than applause. She inhaled deeply, whispering to herself, strength isn't silence, it's endurance. Far inland, Victor poured another drink, pleased his warning had landed. Selina painted her lips darker in a mirror, rehearsing her next lie. Anthony clenched his fists in restless sleep, his heart heavy with words unsent. Diana gripped the railing, eyes fixed on the horizon. The sea whispered its eternal warning. The next wave had already begun rising. Victor Hale leaned back in his leather chair, shadows licking the edges of his office. A cigar burned between his fingers, smoke curling into shapes that looked like secrets too stubborn to die. The city outside pulsed in neon and glass, but he kept the blinds half-drawn, letting only slivers of light crawl across the polished desk. Across from him sat Selina, legs crossed, a glass of champagne trembling faintly in her hand. Her eyes gleamed, fever-bright, equal parts rage and desperation. She looked every inch the fallen queen, dressed in black silk that clung like armor, her jewelry whispering wealth she no longer truly owned. Victor slid a thick folder across the desk. It landed with a soft thud, the weight of hidden sins packed between its pages. His voice came slow, deliberate, like the low rumble before thunder. Evidence, he said. Half-truths, whispers of cover-ups, contracts meant to rot in drawers. Enough to stir chaos. Selina flipped the file open with careful fingers. Her eyes moved quickly, widening as she read, crew testimonies hushed with settlements, board members signing away responsibility, Anthony's downfall tied neatly against Diana's steady rise. She laughed bitterly, a sound sharp enough to slice through the quiet. Perfect, she said, the world loved a fall more than it loved a rise. Victor's grin sharpened. He told her they wouldn't just sell a scandal, they would script one. She leaned closer, the glow of the desk lamp splitting her face into shadows. She whispered that Diana thought storms were behind her. Victor raised his glass, replying that storms could always be summoned, that tides could be controlled. Selina drank deep, her reflection shimmering in the polished glass of the table. Manhattan's skyline throbbed outside like a hungry beast. The pact was made, their glasses clinking softly, unaware that the ocean always answered back. Rain slicked the shipping yard, concrete gleaming under harsh floodlights. Forklifts whined, chains clattered, and crates landed with dull, bone-deep thuds. Anthony dragged another across the platform, every muscle in his body aflame. Sweat mixed with rain on his dark skin, blisters tearing beneath cheap gloves. The foreman barked orders, shouting above the roar of machinery, but Anthony's thoughts were elsewhere. Whispers had reached him, dockworkers murmuring about Victor resurfacing, about Selina's fury gathering like a storm. He pretended not to listen, but their words clung to him like wet clothes. During the break, Anthony collapsed onto a stack of crates, chest heaving. A dockworker lit a cigarette beside him, smoke curling into the damp night. Word is, they're coming for Blake again, the man muttered. The name struck like a knife. Anthony stared at the harbor, water black beneath the storm clouds. He pictured Diana's face, calm, steady, her silence worn like armor. He remembered the way she had once steadied him when his empire wobbled, how she endured even when he betrayed her. And now, danger circled her again. Shame gnawed at his chest. He wanted to warn her, to protect her for once, but fear tightened his throat. Back in his apartment that night, he sat at the small kitchen table, scribbling on a scrap of paper. Diana watched the horizon. They're plotting. His hand shook as he read the words. But pride and guilt wrestled in him. He crushed the note into his fist, then into the trash. He collapsed on the mattress, staring at the ceiling, fists clenching and unclenching. Alone, he realized storms weren't finished with her, or him. And silence, once his weapon, now threatened to kill them both. The conference hall buzzed like a hive, reporters packed shoulder to shoulder, their cameras flashing like lightning. Diana stood at the podium, uniform pressed to crisp perfection, her posture straight as a mast. Applause rippled when she began, but beneath it came whispers sharp as hooks. She declared calmly that the Academy would train women for command, not for scandal. Her voice cut clean through the noise, but the questions that followed came barbed. What about Anthony? What about Selina? Did she plan her silence? Did she craft her dignity as performance? She stood tall, her answers precise, each word chosen like a sailor reading the stars. Dignity was not performance, she said, command was not gossip. Applause followed again, but doubt traveled quicker than truth. Later, in her suite, headlines glared from the screen. Twisted words, reshaped meanings, her strength spun as arrogance, her silence as manipulation. She closed the laptop with deliberate calm. Her phone buzzed. Samuel Ortiz's voice came steady but urgent, advising caution. "They'll twist everything," he said. She thanked him softly, then walked to the balcony. The city lights shimmered across the river, restless as waves. She gripped the railing, whispering that truth was not performance, though she knew too well that the world cared more for spectacle. Far away, Selena rehearsed her lies before a mirror. Victor drafted headlines, sharpening them into daggers. Anthony drowned in regret. And Diana stood alone, feeling calm not as safety but as warning. The storm was already gathering at sea, and she would have to face it head-on. Miami's grand ballroom glittered with chandeliers, laughter spilling over champagne. Selena descended the marble staircase, diamonds blazing at her neck, silk hugging her figure. Applause rose like a wave as cameras flashed, hungry for her return. She had rehearsed every gesture, every smile, every glance. Later, she stood on stage, voice soft but sharp. Strength, she told the crowd, was rising after betrayal. Applause thundered, echoing against marble walls. She scanned the room with eyes that hunted doubt, feeding off admiration while seeking cracks in it. Backstage, Victor leaned close, his whisper curling into her ear. "Play victim, sell pain." She nodded, stepping into interviews with ease. Diana was painted as schemer, Anthony as monster. She said she was deceived like Diana, that love had fooled them both. A tear slid down her cheek, perfectly timed, perfectly captured. By morning, headlines exploded, Selena, the survivor. Talk shows praised her composure. Bloggers called her a phoenix. Diana's name appeared beside hers, twisted into the role of manipulator. Selena read the comments with shaking hands, laughing and crying at once. She raised a glass alone in her suite, whispering that the spotlight was hers again. But through the window, the ocean shimmered in the moonlight, mocking her triumph. She had forgotten seas turn, tides shift, and storms return hungrier than those who summon them. She sipped her drink anyway, convincing herself she had finally won. Anthony walked the East River's edge, city lights trembling on the water's skin. The night pressed cold against him, his chest heavy with regret. He paused at a newspaper stand, Selena's face glaring from every cover, Diana's name smeared beside hers. His stomach twisted with shame. He shoved his hands into his pockets, muttering to the night that he had broken everything. He wanted to warn Diana, to fight for her, but who would listen? He was the betrayer, the fallen, the man who had ruined his own fortress. Back in his apartment, the walls closed in. Bottles gathered at his feet, shadows lengthened across peeling paint. He sank into the couch, head in his hands. Memories surged, Diana folding shirts, her laughter soft in the dark, her silence when his pride grew too loud. He whispered to the empty room that she had deserved better. Shame crushed him, dragging him to his knees. His palms pressed against his face, trembling with the weight of regret. Somewhere, his phone buzzed unanswered. He ignored it, sinking deeper into silence. Outside, the river moved steady and unbothered. Inside, Anthony collapsed under the weight of shadows he had built himself. Redemption seemed distant, unreachable, yet storms demanded it. He sobbed into the night, the sound swallowed by a city that no longer cared. The tide outside whispered truths he refused to face. Storms were coming. And he was still unprepared. The television studio burned with lights hot enough to melt steel. Rows of cameras blinked like unblinking eyes, waiting to pounce. The audience hushed as the red signal flashed. Diana sat centered, her captain's uniform immaculate, posture so straight it could have been carved from iron. Inside, her stomach coiled tight, but no one would see it. The host leaned forward, his suit too sharp, his smile too thin. His voice, smooth and laced with provocation, cut through the silence. "Did you orchestrate your silence for fame?" The question dropped like an anchor, dragging gasps from the crowd. Diana inhaled, steady and deliberate, letting the weight of the moment rest before she answered. Silence was never performance. It was survival. "I command ships, not scandals." Her words rolled slow and deliberate, her eyes locking with the host's until his grin faltered. The audience murmured, divided between admiration and suspicion. A producer behind the glass mouthed the word perfect as if controversy was the treasure they were hunting. Diana left the stage to a storm of flashes, strangers shouting saint and others spitting schemer. Her driver shielded her into the waiting car. Inside, the tinted glass offered refuge, though the echo of the question lingered. She typed quickly into her phone, "Do not mistake attention for respect." The words were for herself, a reminder more than a yes. Statement. Back at the hotel, she removed her cap and stared into the mirror. The uniform weighed heavier than fabric should, stitched with expectation, embroidered with scrutiny. She whispered into her reflection, the words as much confession as vow. The sea asks for truth. People ask for spectacle. The difference could drown a weaker soul. She would not be that soul. Victor Hale's office glowed dimly, the skyline outside blurred in rain streaks. His desk was a fortress of screens, headlines refreshing like waves. Selena's interviews trended high, Diana's interviews twisted into scandal. Anthony's silence was mocked in late-night jokes. Victor leaned forward, savoring the chaos. Conflict sold. Scandal was currency, and he spent it like gold. He clicked another article into existence, Diana the manipulator, Selena the phoenix reborn. His journalists obeyed without question, controversy was their compass. Alone, however, the reflection in his blackened window looked hollow, like a man chewing on ashes. Still, greed was louder than conscience. He called Selena. The connection crackled, then her voice slid through, edged with desperation. "You're winning," he told her. She laughed too sharply, too brittle. "Make sure she never rises again." Victor smirked, tasting smoke from his cigar. "Leave that to me." Yet beneath his bravado, cracks spread like hairline fractures in glass. Lawsuits circled, whispers of corruption followed him. He ignored them, feeding fire with gasoline. Outside, thunder muttered across the skyline, lightning sketching warnings against the night. Victor lifted his glass toward the storm. "Storms. I control them." But the thunder that answered laughed louder than he ever could. Anthony's apartment looked more like a cell with peeling paint and hollow echoes. An eviction notice glared red from the door. He clutched a chipped glass, whiskey sloshing as his hands shook. The television screamed with noise, Selena's smile, Diana's composure, Victor's poison. His own name dragged like a curse across headlines. He hurled the remote, shattering it against the wall, and slid to the floor, his chest rattling with ragged sobs. Memories stormed in, the nights Diana had stayed up studying accounts, the mornings she folded his shirts without complaint, the silent faith she carried when investors doubted him. He remembered burying that faith under pride and betrayal. At dawn, his body ached from the night's ruin. He stumbled to the harbor, salt air biting his lungs. The ships glided across the water like promises he had long squandered. For a moment, the idea of surrender whispered, one step into the waves, no more headlines, no more shame. But a dockworker clapped his shoulder with rough camaraderie. "Another shift, college boy." The words broke the thought like glass. Anthony blinked and nodded weakly. Work, even as penance, kept him from the edge. Yet storms gathered close, and he knew escape was not mercy. He was caught between regret and reckoning. The gala glittered with chandeliers, sequins, and the hollow applause of socialites. Selena shimmered in a gown that hugged her curves like armor, her smile rehearsed to perfection. Cameras adored her, but whispers followed sharper than knives. A journalist cornered her near the champagne fountain, phone lifted high. A video played, her mocking Diana, calling her shipwife with venom dripping from her voice. Gasps spread like fire across the ballroom. Faces turned, expressions twisting, admiration curdling into disdain. By morning, headlines screamed, "Selena exposed." Sponsors withdrew, fans attacked on social media, her empire collapsing in real time. She hurled champagne at her manager, demanding a fix. His silence told her what she feared, fame was fickle, and she was its latest corpse. Alone in her penthouse, mirrors shattered under her fists. Outside, paparazzi howled insults, fake, liar, fraud. Mascara smeared as she curled into herself, muttering broken promises. She stole everything. But the truth was harder than glitter, sharper than stilettos, stronger than lies. Selena's empire had been built on sand, and the tide had abandoned her. Yet even as tears streaked her face, she whispered into the wreckage, "If I fall, I'll drag them too." But the tide was indifferent, already moving on without her. A knock at Diana's cabin door broke the morning calm. A crewman handed her a small envelope, Anthony's handwriting etched across it like wounds. She unfolded it slowly, her eyes tracing desperate words, pleas for forgiveness, confessions of blindness, admissions of ruin. "You carried me. Forgive me." The ink seemed to tremble though his hand was long gone. Diana's chest tightened. Memories surfaced, his early kindness, his cruel betrayal, the love that had once existed before it soured. She traced the letters with trembling fingers, not ready to answer, not ready to absolve. Forgiveness was not owed, it was hers alone to give or keep. She folded the letter, tucking it into her journal among pages of storms and silence. On the deck, dawn painted the sea gold, waves restless yet promising. She stood tall, wind threading through her uniform, spine straight as her whisper fell into the waves. "Peace comes later. For now, I sail." Somewhere, Anthony wept alone. Somewhere, Selina raged at her cracked mirrors. Somewhere, Victor plodded through smoke and shadow. But Diana stood facing the horizon, the only battlefield she ever trusted. The sea never lied, and she would not let storms dictate her course. The morning reeked of stale coffee and desperation when Victor slid papers across Anthony's battered table. "Headlines sell," he murmured. "Blame her. The world will pay." Anthony clenched his jaw, shaking his head. "I've ruined her enough." But debt pressed on him like a noose. Eviction loomed, hunger gnawed, and shame drowned his last defenses. His pen scratched reluctantly across the contract. Days later, Victor's machine roared alive. Anthony Blake. My wife's betrayal splashed across screens. His words twisted into weapons, Diana painted as schemer, Anthony as victim. Diana read the article in silence, her eyes scanning until she could stomach no more. She set the paper down, her hand steady on the chair. "Storms don't end," she whispered. "They evolve." Victor raised a glass to his glowing screens, convinced of his triumph. Yet cracks spidered beneath his empire, lawsuits swelling, whispers of fraud tightening noose. He ignored them, deaf to the tide rising at his door. Anthony drank alone, guilt clawing deeper than debt. And Diana, though wearied, refused to bow. Victor believed he had broken her. He had never met the ocean's wrath. The maritime conference buzzed with voices, banners fluttering like sails in the wind. Diana walked through the hall in her captain's uniform, her presence commanding even in silence. Samuel Ortiz, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, approached with a warmth that disarmed suspicion. "Captain Blake," he greeted. "Leaders like you change tides." Diana raised a brow, cautious of flattery. But Samuel spoke not of scandal or gossip, only of future, scholarships for women, training academies, ships helmed by those the world overlooked. His sincerity was ballast against the storm. "Legacy isn't spectacle. Its foundation," he told her, his voice calm and unwavering. Diana studied him, then slowly nodded. That night, in her suite, she spread her journals and began to sketch visions, harbors filled with cadets, classrooms brimming with charts, a fleet of possibility. For the first time, hope lifted without bitterness. Samuel's partnership offered a horizon not tainted by betrayal, but strengthened by progress. She whispered into the night, "Not all storms destroy. Some rebuild." Outside, rain softened to a drizzle. Inside, Diana's resolve sharpened. She had found an ally, and even the fiercest storms could not erase the promise of dawn. The Miami apartment no longer glowed. Once it had been a temple of polished marble, endless wine glasses, the hum of admirers in her ear. Now it smelled of dust, stale perfume, and overdue bills piled like coffins on the glass table. Selina paced barefoot, her sequined robe dragging against the floor. She had sold jewelry piece by piece, blaming assistants for betrayal, blaming accountants for mismanagement. Yet the truth stalked her like a shadow, she had burned everything herself. Her phone vibrated, the screen filled with red notifications, creditors, lawyers, former allies demanding repayment. She flinched at every buzz, as though the world were clawing through the door. At last, she pressed a call. The line rang, static heavy, until Anthony's tired voice answered. She whispered his name first, soft as broken glass. He said nothing. Silence pressed thick. Then he sighed, bitter. He didn't need to ask what she wanted, her voice already carried hunger and ruin. She spoke quickly, as if speed would make her plea less pathetic. She said she was drowning, that together they could claw back, rebuild, twist the story into their favor again. Anthony's laugh was hollow, brittle as bone. He said she had already dragged him into hell once, that she had left claw marks on everything she touched. He asked her what she thought redemption looked like. Did she expect him to pull her from the fire while he still burned? She shouted back, words tumbling sharp, accusing him of cowardice, of weakness, of failing her just as he had failed Diana. The call ended not with goodbye, but with Anthony's silence, an absence more cutting than insult. Selina screamed, hurling the phone against the wall. In her fury, she turned reckless. She clawed through folders on her desk, pulling private photos, recordings of Anthony drunk, contracts unpaid. Her hands shook, but pride steered them. She uploaded images, pressed send, released them to the wild, the internet exploding within minutes. Anthony's shame became her weapon, even if it cut her too. When the adrenaline faded, she collapsed onto her couch, mascara streaking her cheeks. She whispered promises to herself, that she wouldn't vanish, that Diana wouldn't win, that the sea wouldn't erase her name. Outside, Miami lights glittered indifferent. The ocean beyond her window rolled calm, reflecting nothing of her chaos. She told herself she still had claws. But the truth pressed against her chest, she was sinking fast, and every grasp pulled her deeper. Anthony sat in darkness, fragments of his phone scattered across the apartment floor. The screen had shown his ruin before he smashed it, Selina's posts spreading across networks, humiliating him with every drunken photo, every whispered debt. The man once hailed as untouchable now dangled as mockery. He slumped against the cold balcony door, watching his reflection shiver in the glass. The city pulsed below, horns, laughter, neon. Life went on without him. He pressed his forehead against the glass, chest heavy, lungs shallow. Thoughts turned darker than the night. He wondered if the city would even pause if his body struck the pavement below. His knees buckled. He sank to the floor, sobbing. Not loud, not dramatic, just a hollow sound, the kind a man makes when he has lost even his own respect. He thought of Diana. He remembered her quiet steadiness, her way of folding his shirts with patience even after long days, her ability to hold storms in silence. He thought of how he had laughed at her sacrifices, how he had flaunted Selina in her face. Shame crushed him harder than failure. In the blur of memory, he saw her eyes, hurt, resolute, walking away not with shouts but with dignity. He pressed his palms against his face, muttering into the silence that she had deserved better, that he had betrayed the only anchor he had ever known. The city's noise seeped into his small apartment, mocking him. He crawled toward his bed but didn't reach it, curling on the floor instead. Sleep came jagged, filled with half-dreams of drowning, of ships vanishing into waves. When dawn crept in, pale and unforgiving, Anthony stirred with no strength. He rose only because the world demanded labor from him still. At the shipping yard, he carried crates with shaking hands, the foreman eyeing him with impatience. Sweat soaked him, but the work pulled him from the edge. Still, when the shift ended, silence awaited again, heavier than the crates he lifted. And he realized the worst storm wasn't around him, it was inside, a collapse no labor could repair. The Academy's grand hall shimmered with banners, blue and gold rippling like sails. Cameras flashed, recording the moment for the world. Rows of young women filled the seats, uniforms crisp, eyes alight with possibility. They had come not for gossip, not for spectacle, but for command, for the sea itself. Diana Blake stood at the podium, her captain's uniform perfectly pressed, her posture steady as the ship she had once commanded through betrayal. She let the applause wash over her without flinching. She raised her hand, and the hall stilled. Her voice carried with calm authority. She spoke of storms, not just of weather but of life, betrayal, humiliation, collapse. She told them discipline mattered more than wealth, that dignity lasted longer than scandal, that silence could be a weapon but endurance was the real shield. The hall erupted in applause. Samuel Ortiz, seated in the front row, nodded with quiet pride. He had invested not just money but faith, and Diana had justified it with every word. Later, she walked through the Academy's simulator rooms. Young cadets sat before screens that painted storms in steel and sound. Diana leaned over, guiding hands on controls, teaching not just navigation but courage. She saw her younger self in their determined faces, forgotten once, underestimated always, but never broken. As evening fell, the harbor outside hummed with possibility. Ships docked, lights blinking like promises. Diana stood on the balcony, the sea breeze brushing against her. She whispered that this was the future, that storms had been her teachers but legacy would be her gift. For the first time, peace outweighed pain. The world no longer painted her as victim. She was leader, survivor, teacher. Diana Blake had turned wounds into wisdom, storms into foundation. And the horizon stretched wide, ready for her command. The leak struck like lightning. Screens glowed worldwide with emails, contracts, recordings, proof of Selena's partnership with Victor Hale, proof of manipulation, staged stories, lies wrapped in glitter. Headlines screamed Mistress or Mastermind. Networks dropped her. Sponsors vanished overnight. Selena locked herself in her penthouse, curtains drawn tight. She hurled glass against walls, mirrors shattering around her. Her reflection fractured into pieces she could no longer bear to see. She screamed at Victor's betrayal, at his statement pushing blame solely onto her. She called him a snake, cursed his name, but the world didn't care. The world had already judged. Her phone buzzed endlessly, but no longer with offers, only insults, threats, laughter. She collapsed against a wall, mascara bleeding down her cheeks. She whispered into the empty room that she only wanted light, only wanted to be seen. But the echo mocked her. Outside, paparazzi gathered not with cheers but jeers. They shouted questions sharp as knives. Was it all lies? Was she the puppet master? Had she destroyed lives for fame? She screamed through the glass, but no one heard. For the first time, Selena realized silence had more power than her words. Diana had never spoken her name, never defended, never fought her directly. That absence cut deepest. Selena was erased not by scandal, but by irrelevance. Her empire of glitter had dissolved, leaving only dust and shadows. And the sea beyond her window rolled indifferent, forgetting her as quickly as applause once crowned her. The apartment smelled of mildew, its walls stained with water damage. Gone were the marble floors, the velvet chairs. Anthony now lived with peeling paint, creaking pipes, and the faint hum of neighbors through thin walls. Each morning, he walked to the shipping yard. His hands, once soft from wealth, were now blistered, scarred, hardened. Foremen no longer sneered, they nodded, recognizing his grit. Dockworkers, once mocking him as college boy, now shared bread, stories, and laughter with him during breaks. At night, exhaustion wrapped him like a blanket. He fell asleep without alcohol, without distraction, only the ache of muscles and the relief of honest labor. One evening, he stood before the mirror. His face was leaner, eyes tired but clearer. He whispered to himself that this was who he had become, not a mogul, not a headline, but a man stripped bare. And though regret still pressed heavy, dignity had begun to thread itself slowly into his days. He no longer sought wealth, only honesty. Each crate lifted was penance. Each sunrise was another chance not to erase the past but to endure it. Anthony was still broken, but at last, he was alive. And sometimes, survival was enough to begin again. A new ship gleamed at the dock, its hull freshly painted, its name catching sunlight like a promise. Crowds gathered, applauding as Diana Blake walked the gangway. She returned their smiles with calm grace, but her heart surged the moment her shoes touched the deck. The crew saluted, passengers clapped, reporters watched. But when she stepped onto the bridge, all sound melted. Only the hum of machinery, the expanse of ocean, the familiar rhythm of command remained. As the ship eased into the channel, waves rose to meet her. Diana stood at the helm, whispering that this was home, this was truth, this was freedom. At night, she opened her journal. She wrote that betrayal had once defined her, but instead, it had freed her. The stars scattered across the ocean like forgiveness. She smiled softly, closing the book. She no longer needed vindication. She had her ship, her crew, her sea. And the horizon belonged entirely to her. Anthony sat at a worn table, pen scratching across cheap paper. Words spilled like confession, his greed, his blindness, his betrayal. He admitted she had carried him, that he had buried her under pride. He begged forgiveness, not for reunion, but for peace. When the ink dried, he sealed the letter. He stared at the envelope for hours, weighing whether to send it. But something inside told him Diana didn't need his words. She had already sailed far beyond them. He lit a candle. The paper curled, blackened, and dissolved into ash. He whispered into the smoke that she didn't need his apologies, that she had her world now. Tears streamed, but relief followed. At the window, he looked at the harbor, faint lights of ships shimmering. He whispered into the night for her to sail safe. For once, his wish carried no selfishness. For once, it was release. Dawn painted the sea gold. The ship sliced forward with quiet majesty, passengers laughing in the background. Diana stood at the helm, her uniform catching light, her hand steady on the wheel. She breathed deeply, whispering to herself that she commanded not just a vessel but her own sea. She was no longer a victim, no longer a shadow of scandal. She was Captain Diana Blake, leader, survivor, teacher, legacy. Far inland, Anthony carried crates with quiet humility. Selena hid, forgotten. Victor chased scandals already fading. But Diana remained, unshaken. Ahead, dolphins leapt like joy. The horizon shimmered, eternal. She lifted her eyes, smiling. Storms passed. The sea endured. And she sailed into forever stronger than betrayal. I'm glad you made it to the end. I hope you enjoyed the story. Please go ahead and generously hit that like button and subscribe for more captivating tales like this. We'd love to hear from you. What lessons have you learned from this story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next story.